As a financial advisor, you pay close attention to risk mitigation. But what about your own risk from cybersecurity threats? That is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Engaging Doctors podcast. Here you will find information about how to attract, engage, and serve more doctor clients. I'm Dr. Vicki Rackner, your host. My special guest today is Brian Edelman, the principal of FCI Cyber. You're going to want to listen to this because you simply cannot afford to ignore this information. All right, so Brian, could you just tell us a bit about yourself? How do you provide value to the universe?
That's a great question. And I've been blessed. I think that when you look at life, passion and purpose are really critical things. It's not just about having money. And for me, my passion has been to assist uh, people in protecting themselves from bad actors. So that's been a very important thing. Early on, a long time ago, I realized that people have a lot of personal information that they, way back when, because I started the company in 95, some of the ultra wealthy, which was our marketplace, realized that they wanted to keep that information safe because it could be used against them. But now it's become a situation where everybody really needs to keep themselves safe.
So, how does a nice guy like you get interested in bad actors?
And that's a good question. The reason that I got involved in chasing down bad actors actually had to do with how my career started. I started working with my mother and sister in financial services. And in doing that, my mother and sister had a different approach to financial services. It was more collecting information that others didn't have. It's easy to ask somebody how much their business is worth that doesn't really have an emotional attachment. But it's much different when you start to ask them further questions about how they feel about their partners, and you start to get into how they feel about their partner's spouses, and you start to get into how they feel about their partner's kids, and you start to, and all of that was where my mother and sister were really pioneers, and they would collect this information, and that information was so important to us to keep safe, because that information could be used in a bad way to our clients. That is really what started uh, the passion for protecting that information. So really, the passion is for protecting information that if that information was in the wrong hands could be used negatively to affect people who shared. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're sharing that information and you're not even asking, I mean, it is up to the person who's sharing the information to make sure those people are going to keep it safe. But what happens when they don't have the right cyber controls and they actually lose control of that data that they didn't want out there?
Well, oftentimes people become in a project, a passion project, because it's a problem that they themselves faced. You might not want to answer this, but did your mother and sister face a breach of security?
No, it was a competitive advantage.
Ah, okay.
So it was a way of, and this is also something we tell our clients. When you leverage cyber or the privacy of information as a competitive advantage, you're now reducing the other people that you're competing against. So they did that in two ways. One is they asked those questions that the other advisors weren't asking. And two, they were demonstrating a safety around what they and how they store that information so it never got in the wrong hands.
And how long ago was this?
God, that was in 1988, 87, around there. I started in financial services.
And do you see a difference now between the impact of delivering the cybersecurity message in 88 and now?
Um, yeah, the big difference, back then, I mean, certainly with the internet and social media and, the average person and can leverage that information in a lot of more creative ways than there was in the past. right now because of social media, because of the internet. On the one side, reputational risk and damage and that kind of stuff, that was what we were fighting against back then. But when you add money into the picture, the bad actors today are really only looking for money.
If I may, I'd like to
Yes,
ask you about your comments on a personal episode that I faced.
yes,
Okay. So I've got my third book about doctors and money out, how doctors build true wealth. I thought the true wealth way. I like this. Let me get a trademark on that. So I hired a lawyer to submit an application. I was told about how long to wait. And then I got a call. It was the USTPO, the Patent and Trade Organization, calling me. And I answered because I was so excited. And she said, is this blah, blah? And I said, she verified who I am. She said, that is great. Well, the good news is that your trademark has been approved, but I just need to verify information before we go on. And so she just read all the information from my application. I said, yep, it's all correct. And then she said, okay, well, in order to get started, I'll just need a credit card. There's a $22 activation fee. And well, unfortunately, I've been down this road with bad actors before. And I said, I am so sorry. I don't give out my credit card information over the phone, but if you will give me a link, I'd be happy to follow the link and pay there. And she said, I'm sorry, there's no link. This is the only way we can do it. And I finally just basically hung up on her. Thoughts, Brian?
yeah. I think what you did is the right thing. I mean, it's trust but verify, right? So, and that's the thing that bad actors do. They leverage emotion, right? So here you are, really excited. You're thinking, oh, this is great. I'm going to get what I'm looking for. I'm going to get that patent. And then the next thing you know, you put in your credit card information, and what happens afterwards is that remorse, right? What do I do now? I just gave somebody who I don't know who they are, didn't follow a process, couldn't verify who they were, but I gave them my credit card information, and those are the types of things that sharing with others help them from making the mistake that you almost made. You didn't make the mistake. So somewhere in your travels, you heard something that said, "Hey, wait, when I'm talking to somebody on the other side, if I can't verify who they are, let me not give them access to money." Right?
I learned this the hard way.
Yeah.
Doctors are targeted with bad actors. So this wasn't my first rodeo.
Yes, and that's the commonality, by the way, not just doctors. And this is where it's when we talk about when I first started doing this, it was in financial services and why it's expanded to much more. Certainly, we have a passion to secure and protect more, but it's really an everybody problem. This isn't just doctors or financial people or people that have money. It's everybody, because if you have money, you lost money. If you didn't have money and somebody took money from you, now you have even a bigger problem. Somebody just put a big charge on your credit card. Is the credit card company going to turn around and say, "Oh, so you fell for a bad act, but you still owe us the money?" And then, you did the right thing. You
All right, so let's step back for a minute. Brian,
Yes.
what is a bad actor?
A bad actor is, so it used to be that people were called hackers, right? And that was kind of the term that people would connect with. But a hacker, if you think about what they're doing, they're hacking into your computer. They're trying to give you a virus. They're trying to hack into some system and go directly into those systems. So hacking is one form. A hacker is a bad actor. But because we've seen so many other methodologies coming out, bad actor is a group of all of those people. It's bad actor is more encompassing. It says somebody with the intention to perform a bad act on another. But in the cyber world, bad actors are the people doing bad things.
Well, can you give us a couple of examples? Real spooky and scary.
I can give you some spooky examples. Well, there's some examples where, and we see these a lot, where all of a sudden you get a random text. The next thing you know, it's a picture of somebody you find attractive. The next thing you know, you're giving them more information, and now all of a sudden they're extorting you for money because they now have pictures of you that you probably shouldn't have sent. My friends, unfortunately, not my clients, give me the best stories because sometimes they do silly things. And the next thing you know, I've got to deal with that. One of the worst scenarios I saw somebody that wanted to earn more money for their family than the financial advisor was earning. They felt the financial advisor was getting good results, but not great results. And they started interacting with somebody through text message. I don't even remember how that started. And certainly that person had a very sophisticated scheme of being able to send what they thought was an application that was like, in this case, it was an application called Bullish, but it wasn't the real application Bullish. It was a bad actor that created an application like Bullish. And then the person unfortunately started, and they told him a story about how they can earn a lot of money. And a lot of what happens with these bad actors, it's emotional, right? So it's things like, hey, you want to earn money, I can show you how to make fast money. And that's what this was. They turned around and told them they can make more money than their financial advisor by investing in crypto, and that somehow they had access to know what direction crypto was going to go in any given day. And they'll be able to tell them whether it's going to go up and down. And you figure out, do I sell it? Do I buy it? It was this whole scheme around this crypto. So he turned around and he put a little bit of money in, and he saw that it was working. And then he put a lot more money in because they were talking about giving bonuses if you put more money in. And he ended up unfortunately going out and taking a mortgage on his family house
Oh.
and depositing that into the system. And then he turned around and asked me, ironically, if he printed out all his returns and he was ready. He was preparing to have all of his friends start investing in this. That's as bad as a bad act gets. Not only did he lose his money, but imagine if I wasn't the first person that he contacted in order to invest in this crypto business. If I had then taken money out because I wanted to make more money on it and started doing the same things, that's about as bad of an act as you can do. Because now all of a sudden I had to turn around and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you should call the FBI." He said, "Well, how do we know?" I go, "Well, there's an easy way to know. Withdraw the money. You made so much money. You doubled your money in short order." And it's one of those things where if it looks too good to be true, but so much of what these bad actors do is they prey on that emotion. They prey on people, and ultimately it's pretty dangerous. But they prey on busy people. So even if you take this and you take a look at the lives of a successful person, and they have a lot going on in their life, you know, these are the bad people that are out there that you just have to be very cautious with. You really, it's the importance of doing business with people, because I think that that's just critical today.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like cyber bullies, cyber terrorists, cyber bad guys are like Bernie Madoff's on steroids because now they can reach a much, much wider audience than Bernie could.
It's much bigger than Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was only in the billions of dollars. They're getting trillions of dollars. This is this. I mean, if you see they've had a couple different shows that were really great to expose this, and they showed these state actors that are sitting in these countries that are bad countries. I mean, ultimately, they have these big bad actor, like, they're making a lot of money, so they have these buildings with these bad actors in it. And unfortunately a lot of it is preying on our elderly. It's preying on it's just preying on people that you look at and you're like, this is not good. So
All right, so as I'm listening to you, once again, I'm getting that, hair on the back of my neck. It's coming up because I'm thinking all about it. So I'm curious about two kinds of questions. One is, how do you protect yourself and your family? The second is, how do you protect the privacy of your clients and basically protect your clients?
well, we may want to switch it and say, if we talk about protecting your business or protecting a firm and protecting your client's data, applying what we learned in business to everybody in a personal level becomes critical.
Let's go for it.
So there's a government agency called CISA, and there's a government agency called NIST. Those are the two important government agencies that affected business. NIST is that national, it's a standards, and they basically a while back, and they came out and they said one of the biggest threats to the United States is going to be cybersecurity. So those two agencies came up with some really great stuff. NIST came out with this gigantic. It's a lot of information, and they handed it to the regulators. And what the regulators did is they boiled it down and they said, okay, if a business, and certainly financial services being an important regulator in the area of cybersecurity, why? Because financial services protects money, and that's what they're after. So financial services took it on. A bunch of the different agencies like New York Department of Financial Services, the SEC, FINRA, these agencies turned around and they created regulations. Those regulations are an instruction manual for every financial services firm they're required to follow. So they literally said, if you do these things as a firm, you have to do those things. And if you ever have a breach or if we're just going to have an exam, either way, we're going to be looking for those things. So every financial services person should do it. But the fact is, what they defined is not just for financial services, it's for all businesses. It doesn't matter. And then when you look at what they did, it's for all people too. It's for all families. So typically a family or even a group of friends can establish the idea of learning about cyber so that nobody's attacked, right? Sharing together what could happen makes us prepared for it not to happen. And that becomes the important thing. And when people don't talk about those things, those are perfect candidates for the bad actor to exploit. But like what you did it right where you ask questions. And that's really what everybody needs to do is start to ask questions and realize, I mean, you don't want to realize after you click the link, just don't click the link. So here's what they told us to do. Number one, they want every firm to be cyber minded, right? So they want every firm to appoint somebody to be in charge of cyber. Whether they know cyber or not, it doesn't matter. You look around and you say, okay, in my business, this person's going to be responsible for cyber. And we're going to let everybody know that if you have any cyber thing to talk about, I don't care what it is, talk to this person. So you appoint somebody. And again, when they talk about financial services, a doctor's office, or just everybody personally, a family, you look at that as the family security officer. In the business side, it's called the security officer, and everybody should know who that person is. So the big question you'd say is, who is the security officer in your life? Right? Who's the security officer at work? Great. Now the question becomes that security officer has been empowered. That security officer has to perform certain functions. Then, if you've been assigned a security officer, the key is to come up with a plan. Like, what does it look like to be secure? In financial services, that's called a WISP, or in business in general. It's an information security policy. That policy should include things that you're required to do by regulation. So if you're financial services, you're going to look to the regulators of financial services and say, I have to do these things. If you're a doctor, you have to do those things. If you're an individual, you may not have to do those things, but those are the things you're going to want to do anyway. So we'll talk a little bit about what those things that it says that you need to do.
I love this WISP. But here's the thing, Brian. Real people work in businesses, right?
Yes,
And you can have these policies, you can have a cybersecurity officer, but if one person who works for you clicks on one link,
great point. So what happens is one of the first things in your information security policy and by regulation, and even by cyber insurance, because some people buy cyber insurance too, and that just puts another set of requirements that the security officer has to know and prove that they're doing the things that are being asked for of them. And in light of what you said, one of the things that happens is there's a security assessment done for every business. And that security assessment is really looking to see if you click that link, do you get to the bad site? So if you imagine you've now assigned somebody to be in charge of cybersecurity, they put a plan together, and like you said, in a lot of cases, just because you have a plan doesn't mean that you're safe. It just means that you have a plan. So in that plan, we talked about the fact that you can hire a firm, and we do that. So as a self promotion, we do security assessments for clients. And what that means is we look at all avenues, like what technical controls that they have in order to determine what vulnerabilities they have. So when you look at cybersecurity, there are things called technical controls. Those technical controls, and again, they're very well established within that CISA. There's a document called CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model 2.0. They talk about all the security controls that you would need to make it so that you're not susceptible to an attack. It doesn't mean that you can't have an attack, but it means that the likelihood of you having an attack is reduced by around 95%.
Well, what are these technical controls? Can you sort of lay those out for us?
I thought you never asked. This is a great question. Technical controls that should be on, and most of these technical controls are also available on personal level too. And you're starting to see these financial institutions and just any businesses like banking, you name it, they're implementing these because it used to be that you had to turn these technical controls on. They may have been here a long time, but you used to have to turn them on. Now firms are turning them on for you, which is great. It's nice to see, and it's having an impact. The one technical control, as you can imagine, and people will relate to, is antivirus, right? So antivirus is called endpoint protection. And what that does when you install it on your computer, and not the trial versions, but actually good antivirus is a good place to start. And that's for the endpoint, or that's you're securing the endpoint or computer. So that's where you start. If you have a good endpoint protection, it won't let you go to that bad website. If you have a good endpoint protection, any of these attacks that you see out there will be prevented on the computer that you're on. So very important to have endpoint protection. The second piece, which is more recent, but and part of the issue with cyber is that it's the personal reaction to it, right? It used to be really annoying if you logged into a website and got a multi-factor code. But now the personal perception, when you understand what that does for you, that's called user security. And what that means is they're trying to show that you are you. So we're no longer relying on usernames and passwords anymore because a bad actor can get those, right? And that's kind of one of those things as a high level technical expert. I used to tell people they're like, "Are you afraid of passwords?" I said, "I'm not afraid of passwords. I don't need a password to get into a system. Hackers do not need a password to get into a system. Therefore, the people that are protecting you from hackers have to have that same level of skill.
Hang on. How do they get into systems without passwords?
They're hackers. That's why they call them hackers.
Okay. Silly
There's
me.
two types of hackers: white hat hackers. That's the types that I deal with, which are people that know what the bad hackers would do. So we have to be a step ahead of them. But yes, that's what a hacker does. They don't need usernames and passwords. They can get into systems.
Okay.
So, but when it comes to user security, hackers have a hard time with that because now all of a sudden I somehow figure out a way to get into your bank and it's sending you a text and I don't know what that number is that it sent you. So the user security is the second part of technical controls. Network security is the third part. making sure that you're using a secure network at all times. This is very important. The question, our advice to people, and a lot of times what we do in these scenarios is give good advice for people. And this is where, on a personal level, what I'm saying applies personally too, right? Everybody on a home computer should have antivirus, and everybody at a home computer should make sure multi-factors turned on where possible, especially in areas where they have money, because that's what the bad actor is looking for. And now we're saying, okay, when it comes to networks, do I just connect to any network that's out there? I go to a hotel and just connect? Do I go to a Starbucks and just connect? When I connect to a common network, it means that the people around me have certain levels of access that they wouldn't otherwise have. I'm not on a secure network. I'm on a network that is a public network where other people are there. And if I happen to be on a network that is a bad network, then bad things can happen. So, very important network security, very, very important. And again, whether it's business or personal, either case, it know the network you're on or don't connect to it.
So, what kinds of things are safe to do on a public network?
I don't. Well, if you have a properly protected device, you can do anything on a public network. So
Ah,
they
okay.
have, and you hear the commercials for NordVPN. I'm not going to endorse one or the other. I don't use Nord, but something like that, where there's a VPN, an always on VPN is what we're seeing coming up, where that always on VPN means when you connect to a public network, they can't see you.
Got it.
That's what those always on VPNs do. Something is better than nothing. But again, an always on VPN is helpful if you have to connect to public networks or don't connect to a public network. Our phones all have the hotspot in them. So ultimately, your phone becomes its own network. So if you're forced to be in public on a computer, our recommendation a lot of times is to use your phone as a hotspot.
Okay. So, the cloud. A lot of us are storing things in the cloud. Is that a
That's
problem?
where we're getting. Yes, it is. So now you get to, so we listed the first three, right? We said endpoints. So the computer has to have antivirus. The user has to have multi-factor. These are technical controls that help keep us safe. We should use networks that we know. And now the cloud applications that we use. We sign up for an email system. Office 365, your Hotmail, um, Gmail. I even have an AOL account still. I use it for, if I have to log in. And that's kind of one of those things that as you're sharing stories with the security officer, that security officer is sharing stories with you, the idea of using and having an insecure email as opposed to your secure email means that when you go to that parking app and you put in your AOL account, that's much better than putting your real email in. So you want to make sure that you have a second email as a good tip to be able to put systems that you don't trust and use that email for systems you don't trust.
Great tip. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome. Definitely using an alternate email that's like that. It helps. Somebody just gave me even better tip because what I like when you share these things with people, they say, "Oh, I even got a better way," and they use a service that allows them to create a different aliases in their inbox. So they actually create a an alias for every one of those outside systems, so they can tell who sold their data. So it's going to be very interesting to tell you some of that. And that's that last piece we're going to talk about. Cloud app security, you brought it up. So naturally, these are the five elements that our Department of Defense for or CISA, which is the cybersecurity arm of our government, had come out to say these are the five areas you need to protect. Cloud app security is right there. So when you sign up for Office 365, the key is to know, is it configured securely? Because Microsoft says that they're not responsible for configuring it securely. So it's the user's responsibility to make sure it's secure. So turning on multi-factor authentication for Office 365, critical. It comes down to these are the things that we need to make sure we do in all systems that we log into. If I log into a system that doesn't ask me for multi-factor, that should be kind of a something to say, wait a second here. There's got to be a setting, something wrong, or don't even use that system. I would suggest not using a system that didn't have multi-factor on it to begin with. But cloud app security is an important part. When we do security assessments, there's a rating that happens that we can give a security rating to an Office 365 instance. It'll tell me a security score, and it'll even tell you all the things that you need to do to make it more secure. So again, as a user, asking your security officer a question like, hey, do we use Office 365? Is multi-factor turned on for all users? What's our security score? Have we had a security assessment? What I want is everybody to be bold to ask those questions of the security officer, because the more questions that you ask of the security officer, the more you'll know whether they're doing their job or not. And that security officer job is an important job. That's a critical job, because if they're doing their job well, you can then share this with clients and say, we are a secure organization because I spoke with our security officer and they provided me evidence that we're secure, not just a statement that we're secure. All too often, we have these IT firms that say they're cybersecurity firms, and they're not. So when we do our security assessment, guess what it shows? There's a reason why people say you have to have a security assessment, because you want somebody looking at that and giving you the evidence that you're indeed secure. And the last piece is data. So you bring up a good point. Keeping data safe is critical. So that's again, part of that document, the CISA Modern Maturity 2.0. They talk about that, and securing the data becomes that's where we started. I mean, we started by securing data, and all of these other things that we talked about are things that help to keep that data safe. And that becomes important. And the security assessment is simply checking to see if you have those elements on, and then in addition, it's been very interesting, but with this last breach that took place, a company called SolarWinds had a breach, and it became clear that you have to now check your vendors. So it's a function of once you know all of this, and once you know the foundation, what we just talked about, you can now successfully talk to a vendor that you're using that's storing that private information, whether it's a CRM database, whether it's a trading portfolio system, whether it's a system that has electronic health records. It doesn't matter. We should be asking all of those vendors, and we're required to ask those vendors, are they safe? Have they been? So when you take it that step further, there's something called SOC certified. And that means that's like asking for an audit from an accounting firm. The accountants have created this SOC certification. And what it means is they're very good at auditing accountants. So you leverage the accountant's ability to audit, not that they're technical, but they know how to audit. And what do they audit for? They audit to make sure that you've assigned somebody as a security officer. They audit to make sure you have an information security policy. They audit to make sure you're following your information security policy. They audit to make sure you have endpoint controls, user controls, network controls. They're auditing for all of these things. And then at the end, they give you a SOC certification, which says that an accountant has reviewed your materials and your firm has demonstrated what they believe to be the proper protocols in order to be a safe firm. These are kind of important things. And as you can see, there are things you can do as a family security officer. There's things that you can do as a security officer of your own practice. And there are things that you can work with those vendors that you're using to store all that information. All of this stuff is the same. It's just a function of elevating the conversation, having the conversation. So imagine as a financial advisor talking to your clients about if they're business owner clients, you should have these conversations. You should ask them the same questions that you're going to ask of your own firm if you're not the security officer of your firm. You should ask the same questions or help your clients to know, hey, who's your security officer? You guys are a business. Who's your security officer? Because even if you think the firm doesn't have cybersecurity requirements, one thing we know about businesses is they have money too. And what happens is, if you think about it, I mean, we've seen a lot of different things happen. There's something called phishing or spear phishing. You know what that is?
I do, but please define it.
If you look on a website and you see, hey, I'm the CEO, I'm the financial guy at this firm, whatever position you may be in, there's phishing, which is I'm going to send you an email and hope you click on a link and put in your credentials. Or there's spear phishing, which is I'm going to send a message to the uh, head of finance from the CEO that says you need to wire money over here because I'm buying a house. That's spear phishing. So when it comes down to it, when companies put who the roles are at your firm, bad actors take those roles into consideration. They try to craft emails that look like they're coming from your systems. And that's why sometimes you'll see there's a message now. And this is where it's a function of a bad act happens, right? And then as the community, certainly those people who want to be more cybersecurity get that email and say, well, can't we do something about this so I can tell it didn't come from the CEO? And sure enough, if you look at the top of these emails, you'll start to see things like this email did not come from your organization. So they're trying to warn you that you want to take extra care.
Okay, what if you've got a new employee? You've trained them with all the protocols, but they slipped up. What do you do then?
If you have the technical controls that we just said, how did they slip up? It would be hard because technical controls prevent somebody from doing something that they shouldn't have done.
Got it.
Not saying they can't slip up. I'm not going to say that. But a new person can slip up. But you would have the evidence. You would have, so you bring up a great point. And what we've seen a growth in is these systems called SIM, which are systems that watch over all of your systems. And if there's a bad act that took place by that new employee by accident, it would notify the security team and the security team would investigate. And time is a critical component. So time is such an important thing because if I figure out that they, for example, try to put their credentials into the system on a computer, I mean, the perfect couple things we can tell, right? If you can go out and buy a computer from Best Buy and start to use it in your practice, then something's wrong. So that's where it comes down to a new thing called Zero Trust Maturity Model 2.0 from CISA. And that says that every corporate asset, meaning the corporation has to secure a computer that an end user is using, right? That becomes now a responsibility of the corporation. The new systems will not let a computer that wasn't set up by the corporation to get into the systems that you need to operate. So if you're a financial advisor and you're using a custodian and now all of a sudden you're going to log into that custodian and it doesn't let you in. Why? Because you haven't told anybody about this computer that you have. It hasn't been checked for all those technical controls that we talked about earlier. There has to be a process for onboarding a computer. That process means that you put all those technical controls we talked about. Now, on the data side, there's this thing called a data broker. Are you familiar with those? So before, when I was telling you about that person that creatively they had a different email address for each system that they had out there. um, they were able to identify when the firms were selling data. And unfortunately, our data is sold to these data brokers, and the data brokers sell it and sell it and sell it. And now your information is out there, and now you're getting phone calls, and they're asking you to sell your house, and you're getting phone calls. I mean, if you get a lot of spam phone calls, that's what's happened. There's a good chance if you're getting a lot of spam phone calls where your phone is just ringing off the hook, your emails are ringing with all the, you're getting all these emails from just weird places. Somebody sold your data, and the bad actor is using that data to try to create a problem. Those are called data brokers. And we're starting to see where there's now services that take your information off of the data brokers. So you log into a website, they sold your information to a third party. The third party uses it for marketing, bad acts, whatever they do. And now we've got to make sure that our data, if it is out there, because I've heard things from people, well, my data is out there anyway. Why do I need to secure it? Well, I'm going to tell you that the best thing to do um, is don't be the low-hanging fruit to the bad actors. So if your data's out there all over the place and they come up with an idea on how to either annoy you or bother you, but worse, take your money, best bet is to be off those lists. So these data brokers, they have new services out there that remove that.
Do you do that?
I do. I do. Um, and it made a huge difference because as soon as I signed up for one of those services, all of a sudden I don't get those phone calls anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you're getting a lot of phone calls and faxes, look for one of those services that remove you from the data brokers. And another thing I would suggest is if, and I can tell you, so on a professional level, it's important to ask questions, but don't give advice. It's almost like being a lawyer or being a financial advisor. We need that disclaimer that says you're allowed to tell people what you do or did for yourself, but I can't give you advice because ultimately everybody's different. But I can tell you what I do. For example, I use a credit monitoring service. I suggest everybody does. I personally use Experian. That's the kind of stuff on a personal level that we have to have those conversations. And Experian lets you lock your credit. But in addition, most people don't know, Experian comes with a cyber policy for like $1 million. So if I have a personal breach, they're there. So keeping your credit locked, watching over your credit, those are important things. Using a password prefix. Everybody should use a password prefix.
What is that?
It's a great question. A password prefix is where you type the name of the system that you're logging into as a password. And it was funny because the gentleman that was telling me about how they create an email address for each system is now switching over to the password prefix model. So if I'm logging into Netflix, my password for Netflix starts with Netflix. I'm not going to tell you the rest of it, but I can tell you it starts with Netflix. And I'll also tell you that I have dark web monitoring on personally that comes with the Experian application. So they will tell me when my password shows up on the dark web. And guess what it says? Right
What?
at the beginning of it. Tells me how my password got there. Because when the password shows up on the dark web and it shows me that Netflix and it's got my password there, I now know it was Netflix that had the problem.
So justice is really important to me. I want to get those guys who did that. Do these bad actors actually get caught and punished?
No, they do not. Unfortunately, I have a scenario where we did help to get one of them. So there are times where they do, but it's rare. It's pretty rare. I was involved in pinpointing a bad actor that was ransoming financial services firms. I was able to interact with them in a way that located them, and the authorities did stop that group. It's rare. Um, Best bet, follow what we're talking about. Let's not be vigilantes. Best bet is don't be on the list. Don't lose your money to a bad actor, and ask those questions. Like I said, it's going to be interesting. If I was a financial advisor, the first thing I would do is say to my firm, who's our security officer? And can I spend time with you? And I would find out from that security officer whether or not we're following the regulation, whether we have a cyber insurance. I'd like to understand what we have to protect that information. And once I feel comfortable in that, and I'd like to know from them, have we had a security assessment? And how did we do? Did we find some things? Did we upgrade some things? What are we doing? And be observant, because the other thing is like I'm telling you, if all of a sudden you log into a corporate system from a computer that the company didn't know about, well, that's a red flag, right? Because now I know the company is not protecting me from using any computer and logging into our main systems. And that means that if I'm on a system that's compromised and I log into something as simple as our CRM, and the bad actor downloads the entire CRM to that computer that shouldn't have logged in, now you can understand how scary it can be.
Yeah. So, Brian, most of the people who are listening to this podcast or watching the podcast are solo firms.
Yeah.
So, who is their cybersecurity officer?
A solo firm, very clearly, the solo practitioner is the security officer. 100%. Now, if they're a solo practitioner, and remember, there's different, as you know, types of financial services, right? So sometimes I'm just a planner. Sometimes I'm a planner and an investment advisor. If I'm an investment advisor, that means that I'm going through a custodian. They have resources to help me be a security officer. If I'm a um, registered rep, I'm part of a broker dealer, then the broker dealer has a security officer. So registered reps are the responsibility of the security officer at the broker dealer, which can get kind of funny. So better be proactive about asking the questions. Ask questions, the same questions we're talking about. But generally, if you're a solo practitioner, you are your security officer. So it's important to learn the things that I'm telling you. What is it that I have to do? Make sure I buy a cyber policy. Make sure I look at the answers I gave in the cyber policy, and then I can prove I'm doing those things. So these become the important things. And if I need help, again, when it comes to financial advisors, we're there to help any financial advisor, solo practitioner or not. And when it comes to other practices, then it's important to look around for and know who those people are. Better to find out who the people are protecting you when you're doing it proactively than to deal with it during a breach. I can promise you. You want to talk about anxiety? Find out who your security officer is after you've had a breach. Have a breach. Now, everybody should be trying an incident response. You know what that is?
Please tell us.
Every firm is required to do certain things. Like I said, you're required to appoint somebody as a security officer. You're required to do or have an information security policy. You're required to have a security assessment. You're required to have an incident response plan. An incident response plan says, I now have this. Let's pretend we have a problem. Right now, you gave that credit card information to that bad actor. What do you do? What do you do? Do it now. Call up your credit card company and say, you know what? I'm doing an incident response plan. I want to know what would happen if I gave my credit card number to a bad actor and they charged information. Am I responsible for it? Can I get a text? Are you watching out for these things? You know,
Yeah.
That's where we get our confidence in cyber is by going through incident response planning, by asking the questions that we talked about today. Everybody should be asking these questions. And when you ask those questions and then you get confidence in the answer, if you like the answer, if you find out that your organization doesn't have a security officer, it tells you something. But now you find out you do have a security officer, and that security officer is doing all these wonderful things. Share that with clients.
I
If you haven't
appreciate.
participated in it, there are things that you're going to tell if you have a security officer. One of those would be participation in an incident response, and the other would be that you were receiving training, phishing training, cyber training. Those are some indications that there's a security officer that is taking on, or at least trying to take on some of the roles that they're supposed to do.
Got it. Well, Brian, I've asked you a lot of questions and I appreciate your answers. Is there anything important that I haven't asked about that you want financial advisors to know?
I mean, if we got one thing out there, what I'd love to see is that financial advisors are gaining confidence in cybersecurity, that they're asking the questions that they need to ask, that they're not taking it like, I'm not a technical person, I don't need to know. Another key indicator is when you're done using a computer, what did you do with it? So there are all these signals that your firm may or may not have the right cyber partner. That's a big one. If your firm, when you're done using a computer, doesn't require that you show evidence it's been destroyed, that's not good. And guess who's asking about that? The regulators. They want to know what happened to the computer that you used to use, because guess what the most vulnerable computer you're going to have is? The computer that you just stuck in your drawer that, is not getting patches, not getting updates, not being protected, doesn't have endpoint security, doesn't have multi-factor. It's just sitting out there. What happened to it?
That's scary,
Right?
scary. Well, if any financial advisors are now officially scared about cybersecurity, can they contact you?
Yes. Our company is fcicyber.com. And you can simply send a message to info@fcicyber.com. And I have a magnificent team that will be happy to share information. They share different presentations. We build presentations around a family security officer. Again, it's important to have these conversations with clients. One thing I'd love to hear is that people are starting to have those conversations with clients. It builds relationship. And if you've gone through a cyber event, share it. Don't be shy to share it. Everybody's gone through these things. It's terrible. But if you want to help the next person not do it, share it. Make sure that you're sharing, make sure you're talking, make sure you're asking the questions. Start to ask who the security officer is of all the businesses that you work with and the importance of it. And, when it comes down to it, we are there as a resource. We'd be happy to help any firm that wants to be cyber secure. We're there. We're happy to help. So, just reach out and we will be glad to assist.
And I will leave your contact information in the show notes. If you would like a special guide prepared by Brian that will help reinforce your cybersecurity, go below. You can sign up for this free resource. Thank you again so much. This is really helpful information. I very much appreciate your time.
Fabulous. Thank you.